Hello and good afternoon to this webinar on the current consultation draft of the new International Standard for Knowledge Management, first of its kind. I'm Martin Fisher. I'm one of the committee members of the APM Specific Interest Group on Knowledge, and I'm very pleased to introduce my colleague today and co-chair of the Knowledge SIG, Judy Payne, who's going to introduce and give us an overview of the new knowledge management standard. We set up the Knowledge SIG, as we call it, around 6 years ago and are working with APM members, knowledge management practitioners and recognised specialists and others to understand and learn to deal more successfully with the issues and the difficulties and the successes, let's not forget, of applying knowledge management to the world of projects, programs and portfolio management, and recognising that good knowledge management is a crucial, although often overlooked or underrated, success factor of managing all of those to their best effect. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to Judy. Judy Payne is a management consultant and an academic specialising in knowledge management, collaboration and learning, positions herself on the boundaries between academia and practice. She works with public, private and third sector organisations, improving their management of knowledge. She works with universities to develop and deliver online degree programmes with master's students, helping them to learn how to do management research. Within APM, she's co-founded the Knowledge SIG and is co-chair, as I've said. She's contributed to new knowledge management sections to the 6th edition of the APM BOK guide and to the P30 Best Management Practice. And she represents UK as an expert on the ISA working group that's developing the standard we're discussing today. She's also writing a book on knowledge management in project environments. I'm going to hand over to Judy now, so please take it away, Judy.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon, everyone, if you're in the UK, and good evening if you're in Hong Kong. So as Martin says, for the first time ever, we have an international standard on knowledge management. Well, we almost have a standard. Here's what we're going to cover in the webinar. 6 questions. What is the standard? What is the status of the standard? Why is the standard needed? What are the key messages in the standard? Why are the messages in the standard different from the KM entry in the APM BOK? And what does the standard mean for project management professionals? I'm going to take you through a few slides based on these 6 questions. This will take about 15 minutes and then we'll be on to answering your questions. So the first question to cover is, what is the standard? The standard is ISO 30401, Knowledge Management Systems, and it's a requirement standard written to help organisations manage knowledge effectively. Systems in the title refers to management systems. It's nothing to do with IT systems. The standard is a management system standard, or MSS for short, rather like ISO 9001, the quality management systems family of standards. Also like ISO 9001, requirements in the title means the standard is designed so that organisations can be certified to its requirements. Importantly, certification is not compulsory. The standard can be used by organisations of all sizes and in all sectors to develop and improve the way they do KM. The standard explicitly covers projects as well as business as usual. Because every organisation is different, the standard doesn't tell you exactly what KM methods to use. It does tell you how to approach KM and what you should pay attention to. Question 2, what's the status of the standard? The standard has been drafted by an ISO working group of KM experts from 13 countries, including Israel, France, the United States, the UK, Germany, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Australia. There are 6 UK experts on the working group, including Nick Milton, Ron Young, and me. Other working group members who are pictured here and who've been very actively involved in drafting the standard are Moria Levy from Israel, she's the working group convener, Arthur Shelley from Australia, Randy McCamey from the US, and Mike Wagner from Germany. Those of you who've been around KM for a while might recognise some of these names and faces. In the UK, BSI has set up a mirror group to support the ISO working group. The national standards bodies in several other countries have done the same, and this gives the working group members access to a diverse range of KM expertise. The standard is currently in the inquiry stage of development. It's been drafted by the working group, reviewed and approved by a parent technical committee that I'll say a little bit more about in a moment, and published as a draft international standard. In the UK, the draft standard is available for review and public comment on the BSI website. The standard is open for comments, including yours, until the 16th of January. And I'll show you a slide that explains how to view and comment in a moment. At the end of the comments period, the draft standard and comments will disappear from the BSI website. The working group will review the comments and update the draft with a view to the final standard being published late this year or early in 2019. The working group's parent technical committee is working on various human resource management standards. This doesn't mean KM is an exclusively HR topic. It's more of a cross-cutting topic. There isn't an obvious functional home for KM in organisations or in ISO, and the HR committee kindly offered to take it in. Members of the parent technical committee have been involved in drafting and reviewing the standard, giving the working group access to even more views and expertise. This screenshot from the ISO website shows all 53 countries involved in the parent technical committee. You can read and comment on the standard until the 16th of January. BSI has published the draft on its standards development website. If you haven't already, please take a look. To do it, you need to go to the BSI standards development website, which isn't the same as the main BSI website. You have to register, which is free and very quick. You search for ISO 30401, click on the red ISO 30401 reference, and then select Read Draft and Comment. And of course, you can read without commenting. You can also see the comments already made by other people. If you do have any suggestions for improving the standard, we want to know, so please do comment. Please note that the standard has been written to the management system standard template. This means the structure and some of the text is fixed. If you comment on the fixed text, we can add notes, but we can't delete or change the fixed text. More of this in a moment. Question 3, why is the standard needed? This question has been discussed, as you might imagine, in great detail. When the proposal for the standard was submitted to ISO, many KM specialists questioned the viability of a KM standard. KM is complex and highly dependent on the context in which it takes place. How can it be standardized? When I first found out about the proposal, I didn't think it was a good idea. When ISO decided to go ahead with development of the standard, I joined the working group because I thought it was better to be involved than to criticize from the sidelines. Once I understood the nature of management system standards, I realized the standard could be good for KM. Here's why. First of all, knowledge management is widely misunderstood. There's currently no widely accepted definition of knowledge or of KM. There are lots of misconceptions about KM, such as the belief that it's about capturing knowledge, and you can never capture knowledge completely, or about buying a technology system. It isn't. This causes great confusion and means a lot of organisations are missing out on the benefits of KM. Having an international standard is a major step towards ending this confusion, improving the way KM is done, and ultimately making organisations and projects more effective and efficient. It's about creating value. Now that the draft standard has been published, the discussion has started again, and people who haven't been involved till now are questioning the need for a KM standard. I see the standard as a way of improving awareness and understanding of what KM is and how to approach it. It's needed because when we talk about knowledge in KM, we aren't necessarily talking about the same things. It's needed to help create shared understanding of the fundamentals of KM. Question 4. What are the key messages in the standard? The standard is made up of 3 parts: an introduction, the requirements, and 3 appendices. The requirements is the part written to the management system standard template and the part that has some fixed text in it. More about that in a moment. The introduction and appendices are where we've been able to write about KM without the constraints of a template. So here are a few of the key messages from the introduction, all from a list of 8 guiding knowledge management principles. In my own words, because the standard is protected by copyright, knowledge comes from people. Knowledge is intangible, so you can't manage it directly. Because you can't manage knowledge directly, KM focuses on managing the working environment. Culture is critical to KM. Knowledge adds value when it contributes to something that matters, such as goals or performance. KM is a means of unlocking the value of knowledge. There is no one-size-fits-all recipe for KM. KM should involve interactions between people to develop shared understanding. And finally, don't try and implement KM in one giant leap. Take it slowly and learn as you go. The requirements part of the standard is written to the MSS standard template. The sections are listed here to give you an idea of what's covered by a management system, in ISO terms that is. If you use ISO 9001 or any other management system standard, then this will already be familiar to you. A lot of this part of the standard contains fixed text. The fixed text can't be deleted or edited, but it can be expanded and explained. Section 3, definitions, and Section 4, context of the organisations, in this KM standard both contain a lot of non-standard text written specifically for the KM standard. Here are some of the key messages from these sections. First, the definition of knowledge. Knowledge is defined as a human or organisational asset enabling good decisions and effective action. From Section 4, the context of the organisation, 4 key messages. Be clear about what you want from KM. Be clear about your objectives. Everything you do in KM should fit your organisation's context. This goes back to the idea that there is no one-size-fits-all recipe for KM. The enablers of KM are responsibilities, processes, technology, and governance. And again, culture is critical. In the appendices, we're off the MSS template again, so I've taken the opportunity to explain some of the issues that cause the most common mistakes and misconceptions in KM. Here are the big ones. Knowledge can take many forms, from the seed of an idea in an individual's mind to an orchestral score. These different forms of knowledge exist on a spectrum, and knowledge management is about all of these forms of knowledge. Second, knowledge management is not the same as information management. This is probably the most common misconception in knowledge management. Information management alone will not meet the requirements of the standard. For organisations that want to be good at KM, just doing information management won't get you there. And the final key message from the appendices is that KM culture thing again. A KM culture is one of collaboration, sharing, reflecting and learning. So promote a KM culture. And there's a lot more in the draft standard. Question 5. Why are the messages in the standard different from the KM entry in APM BOK 6? The KM entry in the 6th edition of the APM BOK is based on one of the most common misconceptions about KM. It confuses knowledge with information and knowledge management with information management. Just consider the first few words of the BOK definition. Knowledge management is the systematic management of information. Well, no, that would be information management. As a result of confusing knowledge with information, the BOK entry focuses on knowledge capture, it refers to a knowledge repository, and mentions a knowledge database. There's no mention of the need to manage the working environment, the importance of culture, how KM creates value, people, organisational context, or any of the other things covered by the standard. Why? Well, we can only assume that whoever wrote the KM entry is not a KM expert, and the BOK development processes didn't identify the confusion between knowledge and information. This particular misconception about KM is so deeply embedded in project management thinking that it's easy to imagine how it found its way into BOK 6. It's not all bad. The KM entry correctly identifies the need for KM throughout the life cycle of projects and programs. It mentions funding for KM, and a new edition of the book is on the horizon. And finally, for the presentation, question 6. What does the standard mean for project management professionals? Well, the standard is an opportunity to find out what KM is really about. If you already know what KM is really about, and chances are you do because you're interested in it and you've joined this webinar, it's an opportunity to help others find out and to build support for KM. In the longer term, the standard is an opportunity to make projects and programs more effective and efficient. Using the standard and certification to the standard, if you choose to take this route, is a way of demonstrating to clients and other stakeholders that you're serious about and competent at managing knowledge. And of course, what you do with these opportunities is up to you. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention. Martin's now going to read out some of your questions. Over to you, Martin.
I'll start off with the earliest ones. Management systems are important, that which IT tools have been determined to be compliant? I think the answer is none, because that isn't really the question, but Judy, would you like to say anything about that?
Okay, it's an important question. Knowledge management has very little to do with IT, and certainly nobody will be judging whether any particular IT tools are compliant or not. Of course, technology is important in knowledge management the same way that it is in any other area of work, but knowledge management is nothing to do with IT systems. It's about people learning, sharing knowledge, creating knowledge and using it.
And as I said, we will be providing full written responses to all of these questions anyway. That one was from Jason. Sharaj asks, is it worthwhile defining the term knowledge with regards to project environment and for organisation?
That's an interesting question as well. The definition of knowledge in the standard: a human or organisational asset enabling good decisions and effective action in context. The definition of knowledge doesn't change. There is certainly no need to have a different definition of what knowledge is in a project or a program or in business as usual. In fact, if you were to do that, it would be very confusing for people who were involved in more than one project. So there's no need to have any kind of a different definition of knowledge. The scope of the knowledge that you're interested in a project will be quite different from the scope of the knowledge that you're interested in a program, a portfolio, or across a whole organisation.
Not about defining or redefining the whole of knowledge. Any endeavours under the banner of KM need to really identify what you're saying is for you, whatever you're involved in, is the most critical area. So that's how you define it, essentially. What about knowledge generated by artificial intelligence? That's from Steve.
Excellent question. You will have noticed, Steve, that the definition of knowledge states that it is a human or organisational asset. And I said earlier on in the presentation that knowledge is created by people, and it does state that in the standard as well. The question of whether knowledge generated by artificial intelligence is actually knowledge or not is a very interesting one. And it's the subject of quite a lot of debate at the moment. I suppose you could say that ultimately the knowledge came somewhere along the line from people. I'm not sure. I actually predict that we will have a new term, a new word for the knowledge that is generated through artificial intelligence. We just don't know yet. No crystal ball, I'm afraid, but great question. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Another one from Emma is, what are the APM going to do to change the perception of knowledge management when the new APM BOK is released?
All I can say is that the new edition of BOK 7, when it comes out, I hope it will have a better, more current, more widely accepted definition and description of what knowledge management is. Certainly the Knowledge SIG have already said to APM that we think that what's there is wrong and we would like to put it right. And we hope we'll be able to. We've also proposed to APM, we don't know yet whether this will go ahead, but we have proposed to APM that as the Knowledge SIG, we produce a guide to knowledge management, which would then be something that was produced by APM that would fill the gap maybe between now and when the next edition of the BOK is published.
In a similar fashion, Merv has asked, a subject close to many project managers' hearts, or possibly not. It is generally accepted that the lessons learned process at the end of the P2 life cycle is by and large inefficient and ineffective. How will the standard improve the lessons learned process?
You might have to stop me here, Martin, because as you know, I could go on forever about lessons learned. First of all, lessons learned means different things in different organisations. In some organisations, it actually is a synonym for knowledge management, and it's done quite well. All too often, I'm afraid, lessons learned just refers to a lessons learned database, some sort of a repository where people capture their knowledge, which of course isn't possible. And people are expected to go and find the lessons that somebody else has learned. And of course, people find that difficult because even if there's a wonderful search facility, you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to type into the search box. My big hope for the standard is that people in project land will start talking about knowledge management rather than just lessons learned. Lessons learned is a term that's only used in project management. The rest of the world just talks about knowledge management or sometimes organizational learning, very similar things. So my big hope for the standard is that it'll open people's eyes and widen the general project management view of what knowledge management is, and that lessons learned as a term will become less used, and people will understand that there is this thing called knowledge management, that lessons learned is a sort of approximation to, and people will do proper knowledge management.
Right, I think this might have to be our last question for now. It's from David, and the question is, can you advise on options to implement the KM in an organisation that does not have a KM system?
Thank you, David, for the question. I wish that I could actually speak to you, because when you say doesn't have a KM system, I'm not sure whether you mean a management system or a technology system. I'm going to assume that you mean management system, because there is no such thing as a KM technology system. Technology vendors will tell you that all you have to do is to buy their system, and suddenly you will be good at knowledge management. Well, you won't, because knowledge management means that people have to do it. That's why culture is so important, and people won't do it. If people are sharing knowledge, creating knowledge, and using it effectively anyway, a technology system might help. So if you mean, assuming that you mean management system, the standard sets out the elements of the management system that need to be in place. And it's all driven by what you want to achieve with your knowledge management, because knowledge management a means to an end. You don't do it for its own sake in the same way that you don't do projects for their own sake. You do it because you want to achieve something. You want to meet a goal. You want to contribute to policies or to strategic aims of the organisation. And it's all in the draft standard, which you'll be able to see on the BSI website until the 16th. After that, it will disappear for a while. So I'd go and have a quick look now. It'll disappear until it's finalised and published.
Got one final slide, a little bit about the knowledge SIG. This is provocatively entitled Get Involved, as you can see. So you can comment in the ways that Judy has described. You can come and look at what we're doing via our contact pages on the APM website. So go to the APM website and look under community groups and SIGs, and you'll find us there. The same people who are running the SIG are also running what we call the KM in Projects community. That's on the platform called the Knowledge Hub with a khub.net. It's quite easy to remember, hopefully. So come and join us there. And also as a SIG, principally Judy and an animator and a conversation partner have all made a series of 10-minute video animations which are on YouTube, on the APM YouTube channel, all under the title of Courageous Conversations, covering a wide range of topics concerning knowledge, organisations, management, and so on. So I think at that point I better wrap this up and thank everybody for joining. Thanks to Judy. Bye for now.